It's time to start the seminar. So in commemorating the MOU between Mongya University and Komira, so we'd like to have a back seminar, a special back seminar. So I'm very happy to have this kind of a seminar. Let me introduce myself. My name is Youngjun Choi. I'm a vice chair of the Komira and a professor of the Gyeonggi University. So today we have one presentation from the Professor Choi Hyunjin, the Gyeonggi University. So he will present when money brings peace, cash-based aid and civil war violence. So he is the specialist in political science, and he also studied the Myanmar in the long time. So he can he can give some many insight to the Myanmar society as well as the Korean the communities. So I'd like to invite Professor Choi Hyunjin. Please give him a big hand.
Hello, it's very nice to meet you. I'm Hyunjin Choi from Political Science Department of Gyeonggi University. Today, I'm going to make a presentation on my latest paper on the relationship between economic aid project and the violence during civil war. And I'm going to test my theory based on the case of Myanmar civil war. Okay, the title of my paper is When Money Brings Peace, the Cash-Based Aid and Civil War Violence. Introduction. And let me first explain my research puzzle, the research question. And during civil war, and there is usually the humanitarian crisis. Many people lose their home, and also there are large numbers of refugees during civil war, and therefore the government and also international organization and NGOs provide humanitarian aid. Okay, and there are two examples of humanitarian aid programs during the Afghanistan war by the American military force. The first one was the Commander's Emergency Response Program. And it was a small-scale economic aid program. And most of the program was based on cash, such as cash transfer or conditional cash transfer or microfinancing. And after the war, the research organization found that a $10 increase in per capita spending was associated with a decrease of 16 violent events per 100,000 people in Afghanistan. However, there's another program called the Local Governance and Community Development Program, LGCD. And the goal of this program was to provide large-scale infrastructure, which was very important for the long-term economic development of Afghanistan. However, we found that this large-scale economic development program made the situation worse. In the village that received this program, we found a larger numbers of violent events. So what can explain this difference? What kind of economic aid program can bring about peace and stability during civil war? What kind of foreign aid brings peace? That's my research question. And this is a theoretical model of my paper. And this is a three-player model of asymmetric civil war. And during civil war, there is a battle between incumbent and insurgent. So incumbent usually means the government and foreign troops who support the government. And insurgent means rebels or terrorists. And the insurgent attacks the government force, and the government tries to suppress the insurgent. And therefore, we call it battle. battle between government and rebels. But here is another player. Between government and insurgent, there is a civilian. And civilians play a very important role during civil war. Because the insurgents have no military budget, they need the support of a civilian. And during civil war, the civilians provide water, food, clothing, and also manpower to insurgents. And therefore, if we see the case of, for example, Syrian civil war or civil war in Iraq, then civilians provide a lot of resources to, for example, Islamic State, and sometimes they directly join the Islamic State. This means insurgents really need civilian support and their help to win this civil war. And for this reason, insurgents provide some economic services and also the threat of punishment to enforce civilian cooperation. On the other hand, the government force also needs to cooperate with the civilian population. And also the government tries to prevent civilians from supporting rebels. And for this reason, the government provides some economic aid and also services to civilian population. And in return, the government expects civilians to provide some secret information on the activities of insurgents. And we call it tips or denunciation, 고발 in Korean. And therefore, during the civil war, the information provided by civilian population is important for the success of military operation against rebel force. So how can we make people cooperate with the government? And how can we encourage people to provide the information to the government force during the civil war? That is my key research question. So what kind of economic incentive or foreign aid can encourage people to share information with the government? To explain this question, I divided types of economic aid into 4 different groups. So I made 2 different criteria. The first, the type of aid, and the second, the manner of distribution. The type of aid can be broadly classified into private goods and public goods. And the manner of distribution can be classified into conditional or unconditional. And based on these 2 criteria, I divided the economic development project into 4 different types. The first one is called reward. That is conditional private goods. It means private goods or services can be provided to targeted recipients or locations with a set of conditions required by the program. A good example of a reward is a conditional cash transfer. Some governments provide cash to civilian population based on a specific condition. For example, some governments provide cash to people under the condition that all the families go to hospital and make a health checkup, or on the condition that the parents send their children to school. And this is called the conditional cash transfer. And during the Afghanistan war, the American military force sometimes provide cash to people, Afghan people, on the condition that they provide some information on Taliban rebel force. The second type is a humanitarian aid. That is private good, but there is no condition. Okay? As you can imagine, some humanitarian goods that is simply distributed from the airplane in the air. Okay? So it's unconditional provision of private goods. And the third and the fourth one are related to public goods. So these public goods usually include large-scale social infrastructure, such as health and education system. And I argue that the first type of the economic project, that is a reward, is most effective to generate civilian cooperation during civil war. But before explaining this hypothetical mechanism, first, I'd like to explain the scope condition of my theory. I'm interested in asymmetric civil war. This means the civil war where the government force enjoy superior military resource and logistical advantage. Simply speaking, the civil war where the government is relatively stronger than rebels. So they can provide economic services to most of the townships. And secondly, this is my assumption. The civilians in conflict zones provide information to foreign troops or government force for their self-interest. Some scholars argue that the civil war are driven by religious, ideological, or ethnic purpose. And therefore, some ethnic group provide help to their co-ethnics. However, I object this kind of argument. The people during civil war provide help to political groups for their self-interest. And here is my key argument. Civilian cooperation depends on the provision of material benefit, not their religious affiliation or ethnicity. And therefore, the government force, the government or foreign troops provide aid to civilians to get their cooperation. But however, to be effective, this aid project must be private goods, such as cash payments, microfinancing, jobs, and others. The public good cannot achieve this goal. The public good provides benefit to the entire community. However, this kind of public good cannot motivate people to share information. Because public good is different from private goods. If you receive a public good, you may expect some benefit regardless of what you are doing with the government. And therefore, private goods is more effective than public goods. And therefore, based on this argument, cash-based aid will be the most effective in generating information sharing between government and civilian. And as a result, and this will weaken the rebels' influence within the village. And also, eventually, this can bring stability to conflict-affected areas during civil war. And based on this argument, I generated two hypotheses. The first one, the greater the provision of cash-based aid, such as rewards, the more likely it is that civilians will support the government. Secondly, the greater provision of cash-based aid will decrease the level of violence. That is, they will bring about peace. Now here is the empirical test of my two hypotheses. Based on the case of Myanmar Civil War from 2012 through 2020. And I tested my first hypothesis in this manner. To test the first hypothesis, we conducted some survey for 576 adults living in three states of Myanmar, Kachin, Northern Shan, and Rakhine states during March and June 2020. And these three locations are primary locations of rebel activities in 2020. And also during this year, the government exercised dominant control. And under the leadership of the government, there was a large-scale economic project, including cash-based aid. And in this region, we conducted a survey, and our key index was, we call it pro-government index. And this index is based on 4 questions. And each question measures different dimensions of people's pro-government attitudes. The first question, the government has the right to make decisions that people always have to abide by. Secondly, the military has the right to use force to maintain internal order and security. And third, we should support our country in every possible way. And lastly, we should be willing to fight for our country in times of crisis. And for each question, the respondent is required to answer from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The summation of all score represent the degree of pro-government attitude for each household adults. And this is a general distribution of these adult household members. In general, the people living in these three states tend to be more pro-government. However, there is some levels of variability. Okay? Some levels of variability. So mean score. So here, the score 1 represents the most pro-government, and the 0 means least pro-government. Okay? So as you can see here, there's some levels of variability. And to test the first hypothesis, our explanatory variable is the satisfaction with the government aid and also satisfaction with foreign aid. And the third variable is the amount of cash-based aid. And the last one is the frequency of cash-based aid. The amount is the total amount that received during the previous 2 years. And the frequency means how many times you received cash from the government or foreign organization during the last 2 years. And also we used a lot of control variable. The foreign aid project in other sectors, such as education, food, health and education. And also we controlled for financial satisfaction, the levels of education, religiosity, age, and gender. And this is our result. And you can see some, you can see the box colored in red color. The cash amount and cash frequency that has a positive and statistically significant effect on the pro-government attitude of Myanmar people living in 3 states, Kachin, Rakhine, and Northern Shan. And that means the more you receive the cash-based aid from the government or foreign troops or foreign organization, you tend to be more pro-government. But however, other sectors such as education, food, health, and infrastructure, there's no such effect. So I found this as an evidence that supports my first hypothesis. The more you receive the cash-based aid or private goods from the government, you tend to be more pro-government and be supportive of the government during civil war. And second test for my second hypothesis. My second question is, if it is true, then whether this cash-based aid can bring about peace. And to test the hypothesis, I used this data source called Myanmar Information Management Unit. And this is a very useful database that provides local information for all types of development projects from government, NGOs, and international organizations. It provides information at the national level, state level, township, and even village levels. Although this is very useful, but no political science or no research on civil war has never used this data source before. So once again, my unit of analysis is township year. And my dependent variable is a battle death. The battle death means how many people died as a result of a battle between the rebel and the government. And like my previous analysis, my independent variable is the number of aid projects. Number of aid projects in different sectors of a development project. And my key variable is livelihood, colored in red. The livelihood sector means microfinance, cash for work, or cash grant. And therefore, the aid in the sector, livelihood, means cash-based aid. And therefore, this is my key variable. And for the second period, from 2014 to 2020, my variable is the number of agencies participating in IDP-related project. And here, IDP means internally displaced people. So number of agencies participating project for internally displaced persons. And also again, I use livelihood variable again. The number of agencies that distribute cash-based aid project to those people. And this is the map of Myanmar. The gray colored area means no civil war during my research period. But the colored area means stage where more than 25 people died as a result of deaths within a year. And therefore, I included only stage that experienced civil war during my research period. And within those states, there is a variation of color. The darker the color, there are higher numbers of cash-based aid. And also red dots on this map represent the location of deaths because of a battle. The exact location where people died as a result of battle. And let's see the relationship between cash-based aid and civil war violence, the number of deaths. As you can see here, the first variable that is called the livelihood, there is a significant and negative effect on the number of battle deaths. That is, the more we provide cash-based aid to people, we can effect lower numbers of battle deaths. And also again, and this is the analysis for the second period. And here again, I found a strong and the negative effect of cash-based aid on the number of battle deaths. And this is a graphical summary of my statistical finding. And here on the x-axis represent the number of organizations that provide cash during my research period. And the y-axis represent predicted number of battle deaths. And when there's no organization that provided cash, we expect about 1.5 battle deaths within a township within a specific year. But however, when the number of such organizations increase from 1, 2, 3, and 4, this number of battle deaths gradually decrease and becomes almost zero. And here is a summary of my finding. The cash-based aid increased voluntary information flow from civilian population to government force. It makes people to be more pro-government. And therefore, it undermines the civilian base of support for rebels. And using micro-level data from Myanmar, especially the MIMU database, and we find that increased cash-based programs generate greater civilian support. And as a result, they will eventually reduce the severity of a civil conflict. That is the low numbers of battle deaths. And this is my conclusion. Large-scale aid, such as large-scale infrastructure, although it is important for long-term economic development, however, it does not contribute to peace during civil war. On the other hand, the small, focused program that is driven by strategic goals can indirectly achieve a humanitarian outcome. And also cash-based aid has counterinsurgency benefit as well. And the aid community may well want to expand such a program to win heart and mind of vulnerable people and save more lives, and also create a stable environment that is needed for the development in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very good presentation. It is very interesting and give us some the valuable implication for the state of the Myanmar and other the developing countries. So I'd like to get some ask question from the floor. So especially I'd like to get some the discussion or some comment or some the question from the Mongrua University of Economics. So if we have any question, then just yeah. Okay, the rector. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Very interesting research question and the conclusion. Actually, in our country, that we would like to reduce our civil war. We didn't have any kind of research, so we had new idea for this research. And also, I came from Northern Shan State area. My native town is Lasho. It is also a brown area in Myanmar, and also there are many insurgency area. So I was experienced with this civil war. So I would like to ask two questions. Number one is the second question. There is any difference between Rakhine, Shan State, and Kachin area? Because Rakhine problem is very different from other area, because at that time the government, your study time is under the government. There is the most dangerous area is Rakhine State, the most civil war. And also, the second question is, are there any impact relationship between aid project and the number of deaths? Because there are most number of deaths, the aid agency cannot go there. That's why there is no put in or no project in the strong civil war area. So can it be impact relationship between not maybe the balance very well is the number of deaths and independent very well maybe number of aid projects, because there is no safety, agency cannot go there. This is my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. So if we have other question, another question.
Excuse me. I want to inform you something. Today, Rakhine State is the most peaceful place than the other places in Myanmar. Nowadays, Rakhine State is more peaceful place in Myanmar than any other places in our country. Thank you very much.
Hello, Professor. May I ask your opinion and conclusions? Your opinion is negative relationship between number of better deaths and number of aid projects. Is this true? According to your opinion, there is impact relationship between two variables. This means that more than number of deaths, less than number of aid projects.
Aid project.
Therefore, we can conclude that aid project bring peace. You conclude aid project does not bring peace. COVID-19.
Sorry, can you explain again? 들었어요? 못 들었죠? 네. So we can
Please
have.
show me your PowerPoint results.
Yeah.
Last slide.
라스트 슬라이드. 네.
Last slide.
네. 라스트 슬라이드를 한번 보여줄 수 있어요? 거기에 대한 얘기인 것 같은데. 그거예요? A 프로젝트, 에이드 프로젝트. 동남아 전문이야, 우리 강의님.
Your conclusion describes that large-scale aid projects do not contribute to peace.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We got it.
But your finding is negative relationship between number of aid projects and better deaths. So your conclusion is contradicts with your findings.
오케이, 괜찮은 것 같아요. 오케이. Okay, we got it. Okay, then we got three questions from Mongyu University, and then I'd like to ask the Professor Choi to give us an answer.
Okay. Very interesting and helpful and also challenging question. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I considered three states: Rakhine, Northern Shan, and Kachin. And I understand the situation of Rakhine, especially Northern Rakhine, is very different from other parts of Kachin and Northern Shan. Okay. Yeah, so, I made some statistical control during my research. But at the same time, I analysis by separating each state. And I found that and within each state, that is within Rakhine and within Kachin, I found a similar relationship between cash-based aid and number of battle deaths. But I will study more about some detail and how Rakhine situation is different from other states. Okay. And also, yeah, so some parts of Rakhine state is very dangerous, and especially during years of 2016 through 2020, there are lots of battle deaths within a specific area, northern area of Rakhine state. And during my presentation, I show you a map of Myanmar. And it is colored red because there are so many locations of battle deaths within the map. And therefore, at the first time, I expect that no many international organization or NGO cannot reach those dangerous townships in the northern Rakhine. But surprisingly, I found out that still there are many NGOs and international organizations that are operating within those dangerous townships. And also I made a statistical analysis to test whether this dangerous situation, in other words, higher number of battle deaths will reduce the number of aid projects. Okay. And surprisingly, there's no statistical relationship. That is, although it's dangerous, but still some NGOs and their organization go there and provide help, such as cash grants for internally displaced people in those states. And the third one is about the large-scale infrastructure. And the large-scale infrastructure and large-scale aid projects, such as health and education, and also food and social infrastructure, is very important for long-term stability and the long-term development of Myanmar or any other developing country. Okay, I acknowledge this importance. But however, what I argue is those projects, although this is important for economic development, but they do not really change the attitude of an individual person. Okay. And therefore, although this is important for development, however, it cannot shape people's attitudes toward the government. And therefore, small-scale private goods is more effective for generating peace and stability, especially during dangerous time, risky situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I understand it. You compare with social aid and cash-based aid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So do you have any other question? So it's very productive, the discussion. Okay. So actually our goal is to make some peace and some development in the all areas, not only in the Myanmar, but also other countries. So nowadays, there is some the political instability in Myanmar. So I hope there is some recovery as soon as possible to the peace period. So then we can share, and then we can do more the activities and then collaborations. So the Professor Che is the specialist in the studying the civil war and the other the political instability in the developing countries, not only in the Myanmar, but also the Afghanistan and the other African areas. So he had been to the Myanmar several times, and also get some research fund from the Korea government, and did research about the Myanmar. So I hope his research can be helpful for the Myanmar people to make some pieces in the future. Thank you very much for the joining our seminar. So Rector Didachu, I think you have some word to speak. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your quiz and also for your presentation for the president. This some kind of others research for in Myanmar, we will help because very useful for very good recommendation for our peace process. And now we are for our country peace situation and future developments. So if there is stability, or even though there is no stability, she come and to conduct new situation for this research we will help every time. Also, we will support informal interview to get the more accurate solution. And also, our professor would like to ask your presentation in the PDF file to send us.
Okay.
And send me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the MOU that we had the signed today can make us some this kind of activities, seminars, the joint seminars. Then this time we present about the Myanmar, and then also next time some speakers, the professors from the Monywa University can present and about some Korea and the Myanmar and the other topics. Then we can share our knowledge and the researches by this manner.
We will prepare. Sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I ask the Professor Choi, and I share the PDF file of the slide to the university. He agreed with me. Okay, and also we have a very good and productive the back seminars. And then next time we'd like to have more various the seminars on the various topics. So I'd like to wrap up these seminars by the speaking the concluding of the seminars. So next time I'm looking forward to have the seminars from which has the speakers from the Mongyu University. Okay, so I'd like to thank you again for the joining our back seminar, and also I'd like to congratulate the signing ceremony of the MOU between our two organizations. Thank you very much. I'd like to wrap up the seminars. Thank you.